right, welcome back to another episode of All About the Gear. I'm sitting here with the host of the show, Mr. Doug K, who has, like me, been playing with a brand new piece of hardware for the last couple of weeks. And if his experiences are anything like my experiences, he's been loving it. Doug K, dude, the 27-inch iMac with Retina 5K display. Let's just start it off. What are you happy with your machine? Because you bought kind of the Howard Hughes version of this machine, right?
Yeah, I should say, this is a first for us. We almost always just do cameras on this show. We've taken a few departures from that, but we've certainly never done a computer. But I think you and I both rushed out literally within an hour of this being available and ordered this.
Yeah.
And we're not alone among our friends. We had did a TWiP with Thomas Hawk, who did the same thing.
Yeah.
And I love it. I love it. I mean, I put it this way.
People say,
we're both impressed enough that we decided to do this show.
Yeah, and people say, you guys must be, filthy rich or whatever. I am not filthy rich. I've been saving for a new Mac forever, and struggling with my old 15-inch Retina iMac or MacBook Pro. But I've been wanting to upgrade because of all the stuff we're doing on TWiP to a desktop powerful machine. I looked at the Mac Pro. I decided I was going to get an iMac earlier, and a little bird told me to wait to, so I waited. So I had the fun sitting there waiting to get this machine. So when it came, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to be in the same boat I was with the iPhone, trying to find one after it's already launched. So I pulled the trigger that day, like you said, within an hour of it being launched, and here we are. So. Yeah, I think that Friday it showed up. The Friday after the announce, it showed up on my doorstep. So
yeah, and my scenario is very similar. I had a 4-year-old iMac, and it had reached the limits of its storage. I literally had no room for photos in my Lightroom catalog. I had to start deleting them, or let's say taking them offline, because I had no external disk storage. My old machine had no Thunderbolt. And I was really just waiting and waiting and waiting for an expandable iMac. And I must have talked to that same little bird, because that little bird told me, any day now, new iMac, any day. And that went on for about a year.
You gotta love that bird. Yeah. We're waiting and waiting and waiting, right?
So I was gonna order that machine no matter what the specs were, no matter what the review was. I wasn't really concerned about 5K Retina. Yeah. I just wanted a new machine that I could expand. And so I was primed for it. But I was pleasantly surprised at how great this machine is.
Yeah. So let's talk about it. Let's dive into it. So the baseline specs of this machine, if you just went with the entry level, you're looking at $2,500, right?
Right.
And what does that give you?
So that gives you a 3.5 gigahertz quad-core i5 processor. That gives you just 8 gigs of RAM, a 1 terabyte Fusion drive, which is Apple's hybrid, SSD cache or flash cache plus a rotating drive. Basic video processor, no CD or DV drive in these machines anymore.
Right.
And then good connectivity. But the base machine is really pretty good, except for the RAM. I think that's the one thing that you have to bump up, let's say.
Yeah, I'm always max out the RAM. I think I learned my lesson a long time ago, especially with these sealed machines. Where the RAM isn't readily accessible. You're kind of locked in when you make that order. So max it out as much as you can, especially on the RAM, because that's the one spot, or one of the main spots, where performance can suffer. And these programs we use, like Photoshop and Premiere or the Creative Cloud Suite and Lightroom, they love RAM, right?
Yeah. I mean, just it's the most important upgrade. Now, this is expandable, this machine. I just didn't want to wait to know exactly what modules to buy and all that. I was so desperate for the machine, so I, maybe you did the same, but I spent too much money and bought all the RAM with the machine.
Yeah, I did too. Yeah, I just bumped it up. I didn't want to mess with it. I was like, this thing, I want it to come ready to rock out of the box. I don't want to pull out my screwdriver or anything. I just want it to work and get to making some cool photographs. So what about the upgrades? What if you went with the baseline? So some people went with the baseline, obviously, but if you wanted to max it out like Uncle Doug, what does that look like?
Yeah, so I did get the Howard Hughes signature edition. Has has a slightly faster processor that costs $250 more. The RAM upgrade, you can spend $600 more to get it from Apple, or you can get it from Crucial. You can just buy 32 gigs outright for $332.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up, you can get a 3 terabyte Fusion drive,
Yep.
or you can get a 1 terabyte SSD drive, which cost a fortune.
Right.
Well, not that much. Actually, the Fusion cost $800. What is the, oh, hang on a second here. The Fusion is $150. The terabyte SSD, the upgrade alone is $800. And
800.
I did spend that money, and I love it, and it's a screamer.
See, that's where we parted ways, because I was like, you know what, a 3 terabyte Fusion drive, I'm going to go with that.
Yeah. Well, I ended up putting all my media storage external, and we'll talk about that in a second. I went for the high-end video card for no particular reason, and I think that was probably a mistake. From what I'm reading, for what I do, I'm not sure that any of the software like Photoshop takes advantage of that high-end card. I'm not a gamer, so I'm not too concerned about it.
Yep.
But
and I did again. I went with the step down, or the regular non-upgraded memory card, and I've been happy. I mean, I've got no complaints so far.
Yeah, I mean, I think, put it this way: the base machine is $2,500. With the RAM upgrade, you're going to probably spend about $3,100. And the machine I got was, are you ready for it? $4,400, totally maxed out machine. So
you spent a couple of doubloons more than I did.
Yeah. And that doesn't even include my external disk storage. So
oh wow, yeah.
So we're talking about a $5,000 computer, but that's for 4 years, that's $1,250 a year.
Yeah, and you're gonna use. It's not like that's gonna be sitting in a corner looking pretty. That's a tool for you. You're gonna use it, right?
Yeah, I spend all my time doing Google Plus Hangouts, so I got to have the best machine possible.
And editing pictures for podcasts.
Pictures, right?
Yeah, all right, so here's the real nitty gritty of this conversation, and that's performance. Like I said, when I was shopping around for what the ideal desktop machine for me was going to be, I had that 15-inch Retina on my desk, and plugged into it was a 27-inch cinema display, Thunderbolt, which is awesome, right? I had that plugged in. I got my keyboard and mouse. I'm rocking. I'm ready to go. Plus, I can grab the computer and go when I needed to. But I was thinking, when I started thinking, okay, I'm going to move back to a desktop, the thing that was hot on the market was the Darth Vader's house-looking Mac Pro, right? So I'm like, okay, time to get, maybe that's what I need. If I'm going horsepower, I could just replace that MacBook with a Mac Pro and keep rocking, right? And then this thing came out. So tell me about this, in terms of performance in your tests. Does this stand up to a Mac Pro? Is it inferior, superior? Where does it land?
Yeah, I didn't run the test myself, but I read up on them. In the single CPU test, meaning programs that don't use multiple processors for multi-threading, this is actually 23% faster than the current Mac Pro. Now, Mac Pro is due for an upgrade in the next 12 months, so I'm sure it'll be faster still. But at the moment, this is the fastest Mac you can get.
Wow.
And it's about 23% faster than that, and it's about 14% faster than the less expensive iMacs, the ones that are, don't have the Retina display, those are still pretty damn good machines.
Yeah. You know what's funny though? It's like non sequitur. You remember a couple of years ago when the Mac Pros first started showing up, and I think Apple's ad campaign was comparing the processing power to supercomputers. They were saying, it's a supercomputer on your desktop because it had as many teraflops or whatever as a supercomputer. And now these new computers are exponentially faster than the supercomputers in the old days. So what does that make these? Supercomputers?
Now the Mac Pro, the high-end Mac Pro is still going to beat the high-end iMac in, again, multi-threaded applications. So if you're doing, rendering, if you're doing 3D stuff and fancy video with lots of effects, and you've got the right software, you're going to still see a better machine there. But as we'll talk about, you can't get a 5K display for those machines. So
that's right.
There are trade-offs everywhere, right?
Yeah.
But as we know, just like with computers, just like with cameras, the best computer is the one that comes out right after you buy one. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
right now we're on the top of the curve, and 6 months from now we'll say, oh, damn, look at that fast machine.
Yeah, or we'll just be, doing the apologetics. So mine is
Right.
fine, it's
Good
still a
enough.
great
Only fine.
computer. Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about that display. So Apple has coined the phrase and apparently has patented the word Retina as it applies to computer displays, and they actually have it's not an applied for patent, it's an awarded patent. So they're the only ones that can call their displays Retina. Um, Looking at this display, when I first took mine out of the box, I wrote a little post on Google Plus, I think, about it, about the opening the box experience, and it was, I looked at it as kind of a reality display. It just kind of looked like you're looking at reality. It's just that clear to me. So tell me, like in your experiences with your Retina display, the one that you're looking at right now, does it stand up to the Retina test? And what is Retina?
Yeah, it must be really good because even you look good on this thing.
I know, right? I need to carry this around everywhere I go.
That's it. It is gorgeous. There's nothing else really to say about it subjectively like that, except for the fact that I find when I go to print that the difference between the display and the prints is significantly greater because the images on the screen look so damn good. So there was this guy who did some research paper, and he decided that the human retina can see three significant digits here: 477 dots per inch when viewing something at 12 inches away. So 12-inch viewing distance, 477 dots per inch. That's the human retina, according to some expert. So let's take a look at what Apple refers to when they talk about retina displays. There's actually a whole range of resolutions that they call retina. At the highest end, the highest resolution display is actually the iPhone 6 Plus, which is 401 dots per inch, which is up there pretty close to the human retina. If you go down one level to the iPad Mini 2 and 3 and the iPhone 4 all the way through the iPhone 6, that's down to about 326 dots per inch. And the iPad Retina 5K and the iPad Retina and the MacBook Pro are down to 218, so only about half the resolution of the iPhone 6 Plus. So again, Retina as a trade name refers to quite a range of resolutions. But
yeah, it's the viewing distance. It's not a fixed sort of pixel density. It depends on the device and the viewing distance that is optimal for that particular device.
Right. And the fact is that, when I look at my iPhone 6 Plus, which I'm holding up here, which is so gorgeous, I look at it much more closely, a much closer viewing distance than I look at my iMac. So they're probably very similar in that regard.
And then, so the only, I read that, I was reading the article that you sent over on Retina, and that's like, that sounds interesting, but you get into this gray area when you're talking about humans and resolvable distance, because we all have different rods and cones in our eyes. We all have, some have stigmatism, some people have better vision than others, better color acuity than others. I guess we're talking about the average human at that 12 inches, right? And and what's the age of that average human? Because your vision degrades over time, right?
That's
so
right.
Are we saying the average human that is between 35 and 45 years old, when viewing the screen at 12 inches, this is Retina, right?
Yeah. So let's bring this to the world of photography, and what does it mean to photographers? Let's assume that people are doing some post-processing. They're not just using their displays to look at their pretty pictures. They're actually using this as a tool.
Yeah.
So the display is 13 by 23 inches. All right, and the dot resolution, the pixel density, is very close to a standard color print. Let's say your color print's at 240 dots per inch. This computer is pretty close.
13 by 23 inches. What do you mean? What's 13 by 23 inches?
That's the display area of the iMac.
Oh, I thought it was 27 inches.
27 diagonal.
Oh, 27 diagonal. Okay,
Yeah.
Okay, got it. So 13 high. Okay, got it. Okay.
Right. 13 high, 23 across, 27 diagonal. I had to measure it, by the way, to find out. But it's so anyway. It's basically, if you were to take a print and make a 12 by 18 print and hold it up,
Yeah.
you'd see the same size on your monitor, and it would be the same resolution as that print, roughly. And if you were running Lightroom or Photoshop, you'd actually still have room for the toolbars on your screen. So what's interesting about this is, if you go into Lightroom or Photoshop and you zoom into 100%, or Lightroom calls it 1:1, that if you use Micro Four Thirds, which is a 16 megapixel image, or something like the Sony A7S, which is 12 megapixels, when you go to 100%, it doesn't get any bigger. It's really just about the same size as fit the whole image.
So cool.
And that's, from a workflow perspective, that's really nice.
Yeah. Just like, again, workflow perspective from my side, editing 4K video out of the Panasonic GH4 at 100%, and still having your timeline and palettes and everything else on the screen is just magical.
That's right. I mean, doing 4K video on this thing, you've got all this extra real estate because it's 5K.
Right.
You got a whole extra K.
I got a whole extra K to play with. My special K extra.
Yeah, so it's really a great tool for photographers and for video editors. I really like that. Now, you do more video editing than I do. Have you noticed any lag problems or anything like that with it?
I haven't. And because I have the 3 terabyte Fusion drive, my flow has been, I've got external Drobo Mini that's got my drives in there that I, usually work from, or at least in my old sort of metaphor with the MacBook Pro, was working at using that as my main work drive. On this machine, I have 3 terabytes to play with for my, my active projects. So my projects, my video files, live on the internal drive until I archive them off. And I got to tell you, Doug, it's like editing 640 by 480 video.
It's just that easy.
But at 4K, there's no lag. It's kind of a weird perception of when your computer keeps up with you in terms of the creative decisions that you're making. I want to cut this, I want to drag this over there, I want to bring this in, boom, boom, boom. You're just flying at the speed of as fast as your brain can kind of make these creative decisions, and the computer doesn't get in the way in terms of, oh, I want to bring this over, but I got to wait for a minute for the spinning cursor. Okay, now it's here. Now I can drag it.
Yeah.
It just works. And,
well, everybody's been through this. Every new version of Lightroom or Photoshop or Final Cut or whatever you use.
Yeah.
It seems like there's more and more lag in the software. The software becomes bigger and clunkier and slower. And then you get a new computer and you say, oh, that's what they were thinking about.
Yeah, this is what the developer intended.
Right. So you go through these cycles, and this is the same experience here. If you come at this with a 4-year-old computer, suddenly things that you used to have to wait for, you don't wait for it. They just happen more quickly. And one of the things that surprised me was how much faster my browser was. It's almost as though my internet connection was faster. I didn't realize that in some cases it was the browser rendering things that I got from the internet that was slower, not my connectivity speed.
Yeah. Which browser is your primary browser? Is it Chrome?
I'm using Chrome, and it's driving me crazy.
Yeah.
I go back and forth between Chrome and Safari, but
I used both, but I wasn't really using Safari that much. I decided, okay, I'm on Yosemite. Let me use the tool that the operating system wants me to use. So, but I still use Chrome, but when I launch it, things seem to slow down a little bit. Yeah. And then I open Activity Monitor and see all these Chrome processes that are running and stalled or crashed. I'm like, what is going on with Chrome? I don't know. So.
I think it's a bit of a mess. I find it's like going back to Windows 95 or whatever that thing was called. I have to restart my computer on a regular basis because of Chrome. Chrome seems to just make a mess of it, and just restarting Chrome itself doesn't seem to be sufficient. I've learned on these Google Plus Hangouts, if I want to have them be reliable, I have to reboot the machine and restart Chrome.
Oh, maybe that's what I should have done, because I crashed once during this show.
That's right. That's right.
So, but I'm using Safari. I'm recording this through Safari. So
who knows? Hey, what? I'll tell you one thing I worried about when I got this. My old iMac had a fairly high amount of glare on the screen. There was a lot of glare. I could see myself if I wasn't wearing dark. This beautiful white hair just stood out like gorgeous. And I was very impressed that this 27-inch iMac Retina 5K is pretty low glare. Have you found the same thing?
I've noticed the same thing. Yeah, and yeah, it translates into less eye strain, and yeah, you don't like as I move side to side and look at the display, I don't see anything behind me, and yeah, less glare definitely.
Yeah. And one other thing I want to say, you mentioned the Fusion Drive and how well that's worked for your video editing.
Hmm.
If if you're concerned about this, the SSD drive, the performance on writing to the drive is actually twice as fast with SSD as it is with the Fusion Drive.
Uh-huh.
Reading is comparable, but the
Okay.
writes are actually twice as fast. It's a screamer. It's an absolute screamer.
Wow. Wow. Hey, there's got to be something to stretch for. So
That's
in
right.
4 years, my next Mac, I'll get SSDs in it. And it'll be
Okay.
happy. So okay. So here's a question. You mentioned photographers. Um, on one of the shows that we did in the past, Martin and Derek were on the show, and we were talking about this 5K displays. And who was it? Was it Derek or was it you? Someone mentioned that these some new cameras, particularly the Micro Four Thirds cameras that we love so much, can't produce a file that will fill the screen on the new 5K iMac.
Right.
So is that true? Or
Yeah, so I had told you that, and you brought it up on TWiP, and Derek in particular took exception to that. So, Derek, I love you. You're a great friend, but I got to tell you, I've done the math, and I've actually looked at the images too. It's not just the math. But if you want to do wallpaper, meaning you want to fill the screen with an image of the camera at full resolution, remember you've got to deal with the aspect ratio. So 18 megapixels isn't always the same thing.
Mhm.
It turns out that with a standard sensor, not a Micro Four Thirds standard, but like you'd get in most DSLRs, which is a 3:2 aspect ratio, you need 18 megapixels minimum to fill the screen. And with a Micro Four Thirds or anything that's a 4:3 ratio, you need 20 megapixels to fill the screen.
Mhm.
And as we know, all the Micro Four Thirds cameras top out at 16. So
16.5, yeah, right.
yeah, so you know, we can look at the numbers, but I looked at what cameras will actually fill the screen. Like the Canon 60D, which is an 18 megapixel camera, will fill the screen. Even the little Nikon Coolpix L30, tiny little sensor, has a 20 megapixel sensor. It will fill the screen. But one of our absolute favorite cameras, the Olympus OMD EM1, a little bit too small. It's tall enough, but it just isn't wide enough
Yeah,
to fill the
that's that
screen.
Micro Four Thirds sensor, right?
Yeah, yeah. So it's a boxier, squarer aspect ratio, and
Yeah.
it just doesn't quite make it. It actually falls about 500 pixels short on the left and right sides.
Yeah, that's amazing though. That's I would say that's not a ding on the camera or the
No, no, not at
sensor
all.
itself. That's just this is a massive pixel packed screen that
Yeah,
you're placing. 4K not filling the screen is crazy. So
it is. It is. It's sweet.
all right. So we've sung the accolades of this machine. I think people understand that we both are happy. And we would if I wasn't happy with this machine, I would say it. But there's always another edge, right? So negatives. What problems did you have when
My
you
my problems weren't the machine. My problems were that I upgraded to Yosemite at the same time. I held off on the Yosemite upgrade.
mhm.
So when I got the iMac, I also went to Yosemite, and I just had problems with compatibility of apps. I had trouble with all of Creative Cloud. Creative Cloud, I had to get on the phone with India for 20 minutes and do
Oh.
a deinstall, reinstall. Carbon Copy Cloner, a utility I used. Even Google Drive, I ended up having to reinstall Google Drive and re-download all the files. But that was not the fault of this machine. That was the fault of either me or the upgrade to Yosemite. How about you?
Yeah, I haven't had any problems. The only thing, like I said, was the issues with Chrome that I've seen, and I think I went the intended path of upgrade because I upgraded my MacBook Pro to Yosemite first and got everything working nicely, and then the new computer came and I transferred its essence into the new machine. So and everything seemed to work. There were some hiccups here and there, particularly due to passwords and software running on a new machine and want to make sure I didn't steal it, that kind of thing. But otherwise, it was a pretty smooth transition. The one thing that I can say, and I'm still trying to hunt this down because it's an intermittent issue, is sometimes when I'm dragging windows around the screen, there's a stickiness or a lag between when I click and drag and the window actually moves. And I think it might be due to some piece of software that I'm running that's not used to dealing with mapping this, the bigger screen. So I'm trying to hunt that down because it's intermittent. Sometimes it's, totally fine, and other times when I've got a bunch of apps running, it gets a little hung up when I try to move windows around. So that's the only other thing.
Yeah, it's it's one of those things. You bring up activity monitors, you say, and you see all these processes that are running, and you say, what is all this crap? What are all these things? Because they've over the years they accumulate. It's like Windows, right?
Yeah.
Things get bigger and more complicated, and you have a choice. You can either go track them down and find out what they are and how to get them out of your system, or you can just keep buying a more powerful machine and not worry about it. I mean, that's what you're sort of stuck with.
Exactly. All right, Doug. So much like when we do the reviews on cameras, the question I always ask is about competition. Like, who's the competition for this particular body? It's a computer this time. So who's in the market?
Yeah, good question as always, Frederick. In this case, there are a couple of options. First of all, there are other iMacs that are competitors. One is the smaller 21.5-inch iMac.
Yeah.
Which is only an $1,100 computer at the low end. So it goes about $1,100 to $1,500. It's a lot less expensive. It doesn't have Retina. Great machine. Apple came out with that, I think, about a year ago as this sort of entry-level iMac, and it's a great machine.
Yeah.
Save a lot of money. Or you can stay 27-inch but not go with the Retina. They're still selling that machine. That one, if you compare apples to apples, in other words, you really upgrade the processor in that machine to be close to this one, you're only going to save $100. So I would say, unless if you want to save money and a 21.5-inch screen is good enough for you, you can save, $600 or more by going with that other machine. But if you're going to go 27-inch, definitely get this one.
Okay.
The other thing is, what about third-party monitors? This is a big, big issue. Dell has announced that they're coming out with a 5K monitor called their Ultra Sharp 5K.
Yep.
They haven't set the price. They've said it's going to be less than $2,000. Well, a couple of things there. First of all, this thing's only $2,500 in the base configuration, and it's not just a monitor; it's a whole computer.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you're in the Apple world as opposed to the Microsoft world. I don't know why you'd want a 5K monitor, and you technically cannot run a 5K monitor off of this machine using Thunderbolt 1 or 2. This is a very
you can't plug a second, a 4K. You can't plug a 4K or 5K display into this machine?
You can plug a 4K in.
Okay.
Right? But Thunderbolt 2, which is 20 gigabits per second, is not quite fast enough to run a 5K monitor at a 60 hertz refresh rate.
Wow.
And so Apple is not soon going to be coming out with a 5K monitor. The 5K monitors that can be used, let's say, with a Mac Pro or as a second monitor or something like this, that's going to have to wait for Thunderbolt 3, pretty much, which is 40 gigs, and DisplayPort 1.3. That's the Apple display technology over Thunderbolt 1.3. So I think it's going to be early next year before that stuff's available at all, let alone in an Apple product. But I'm not sure. I have no idea how Dell is going to let people connect to their 5K monitor and get a 5K image because other than Thunderbolt 3 and DisplayPort 1.2, there's nothing really that's fast enough for it.
Yeah, and I also read that, like you said, just to echo that, a lot of people may be saying, hey, you know what? All right, I'm just gonna go buy that iMac and plug it into my PC, and I'll have a 5K display. Can't do it.
Ain't gonna happen.
Ain't gonna happen.
You can do all sorts of screen sharing and stuff, and you will never get it. You will never find anything that's going to move the data fast enough between them. So the fact is that other than the smaller iMacs, if you're in the Apple camp, there really isn't any significant competition.
Wow. Today, as we record this.
Yeah, let me see what time it is and see if
exactly by the end of the day.
By the time this show airs, right?
People, technology industry does not sit on their hands for long,
Yeah.
All right, so bottom line here in terms of configuration recommendations, right? So you have your Howard Hughes Tony Stark version, and I have my everyman Spider-Man version. So which is the right way to go? What do you
Yes,
recommend?
I have the Elon Musk Tesla SpaceX version. That's what I have.
Yes, yes, you do.
All
Yes, you
right.
do.
Uh, so here's what I would do if I were trying to be reasonable. I would go. I'd order the thing. I would order the machine with minimum RAM because I'd upgrade it using third-party RAM from somebody like
Yep,
Crucial.com. I'd buy just a standard video card even if I had too much money. I would buy the 3 terabyte Fusion drive. Is that the one you got? The 3
that's
terabyte?
what I got. Yeah.
Yeah, I would get that. I think that's fine. I wouldn't get the faster CPU. I don't think it's that big a bump.
Hmm.
And that plus the upgrade, the whole thing comes into just under $3,000. And I think
Yeah.
that's the sweet spot in terms of configurations.
Yeah. Yeah. And what was the fastest processor on this right now?
The fast processor is you got to find it here. It's a 5 gigahertz something. Where is it here? Blah, 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 upgrades. 4 gigahertz quad i7. And
Okay.
that's an extra $250 to go to the faster processor. Um, you'd have to run benchmarks to see how noticeable that really is. But remember, the speed is determined by the processor plus the disk speed plus the RAM speed and the
Yeah.
amount of RAM. And I think you and I both agreed that the amount of RAM makes more difference than anything.
Yeah, yeah, mine's maxed out on the RAM, and I have that 4 gigahertz processor. So those
Yeah.
those two things, and combine that with the 3 terabyte Fusion drive, I'm cooking with gas.
Yeah. You pretty
I'm
much
doing
got.
more. I have more computer than I could have dreamt of just 3 years ago. So,
Well, you pretty much got my recommended configuration. Although because we were both in a hurry, we went for Apple's RAM.
yeah,
And you can save a few $100s by going third party. And at this point, I would do that.
yeah.
Crucial also sells an SSD drive. Apparently, you can get inside this machine to do the SSD drive.
Mm.
You probably have to take it apart quite a bit to do that. Whereas the RAM upgrade literally is opening a door and doing it fairly straightforward.
Well, I'll tell you what, if I ever hit the point where the speed of this is just, unbearably slow and I need to upgrade to SSD, then I'll consider that. So we'll see
Yeah.
in like 2 or 3 years. By then they'll have like dark matter holographic iMacs, and I'll just want to upgrade anyway.
Yeah. And
So,
one thing we didn't mention that's really valuable here is, for me, I needed more than 3 terabytes of image storage.
mhm,
Or I put it this way, I needed more than would fit on a Fusion drive with my apps and my system and my swap files and all that kind of stuff.
yeah.
So I took a recommendation that I actually got from Thomas Hawk, which is to use the Western Digital MyBook Thunderbolt Duo. This is an relatively inexpensive 2-drive unit. You can run it in RAID 0, which means you get high performance but no redundancy. That's my configuration. Or
Hmm.
you can run it in RAID 1, which is mirrored but half the capacity. And that's over Thunderbolt, and it's a screamer. It is, it's up there at the same speed as a rotating disk drive, pretty much,
Now,
because
are
it
you
is.
storing your library and your raw file hierarchy on the same drive?
I am. So
Okay.
the catalog and the images, everything, essentially it's my media drive. Anything to do with media is on that drive.
Yeah, see, I'm the reverse. My media, all my raw files and all that good stuff live on a Drobo Mini, which is thunderbolted into the Mac, and that's off to the side. And I have other Drobos for archiving assets and episodes of TWiP and all that onto. But on the machine locally is the Lightroom library with the previews and all that stuff. So that's
Right.
where I need the fast access is locally. So the drive or the library lives locally on this machine, and then when it needs the raw data, it goes out through Thunderbolt, which is also blazingly fast to get the raw data from the Drobo. And that seems to be a good setup for me.
Yeah. Well, as we both would agree, everything's faster than what we had a month ago.
Oh,
So
oh yeah,
it's
yeah.
pretty good.
Yeah, I
So,
used to have to start my computer with a crank. That was not fun.
yeah. So let me ask you this, Frederick.
Yeah.
Who's this for? Who
Wow. You're
who
flipping
should
the script on me. Look at that.
aha, aha. Who should go out and spend $3,000 to buy this machine. What does it take to make this the right decision?
Yeah, that's a great question because not everybody, I would argue not most people need this level of horsepower. But the bottom line answer to this question is it depends on what you're doing. So if you're doing things where your efforts and the time that you spend working in front of the computer directly translates to money or income, therefore you get a faster computer, means you can get more done faster and make more money or whatever, then yeah, you want the fastest screaming machine that you can get so that you can be more productive. But if you don't, in time and that metric doesn't apply to you, I would not, don't spend all the money to get one of these machines yet. If you're working up towards it, push it off a year, or 2 years or whatever. Get something more pedestrian that fits your budget better. You can still, I mean, like we're saying, there's amazing work that we can only aspire to make that was made 10, 20, 30 years ago on old decrepit computers, right? So you don't need these fast supercomputers in order to be, quote, a good artist or a good photographer. You could go with an entry-level Mac and still create some awesome YouTube videos, personal projects, videos, awesome Photoshop compositions, pretty much anything you want to do. You're just going to suffer a little bit in terms of the time it takes to do it. Yeah. So, but then that suffrage is kind of your sweat equity as you get better and you want to get something a little bit more beefier, then down the line you can do that. So don't, like in the computers or in camera area, don't run out and get, a D3S as your first camera or the best mirrorless Sony A7S, as the first thing you're going to get because that's what everyone else has and you want to get the best to make you, quote, a good photographer. Same thing with computers. Just get in with what you can. Don't break the bank and suffer at the beginning and make your art suffer because of that. Just get something attainable and good and then grow from there. So that would be my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, in terms of should you upgrade to this, obviously it depends on your budget. It depends on, are you a serious amateur pro or not? But in general, I think if you have a machine, an Apple machine that's more than a couple of years old, you will notice a significant difference.
Yeah.
One guideline is if you have Thunderbolt, then you might not notice a difference. But if you're pre-Thunderbolt, then this machine that's a good way to just judge that this machine is going to be quite a bit faster for you. But you're absolutely right. I mean, if I brought in the old one and put it back on the desk, I'd still be able to produce photographs that were just as good or just as bad as what I can do with this one.
Exactly. And what was your old iMac? What was in there?
It was a mid 2010 machine. So it was 3.5 gigahertz, only 16 gigs of RAM, but it did have an SSD. But it was, again, I replaced it because I just didn't have the disk storage, and I could not expand it. I didn't have Thunderbolt to expand it. So
what's going to happen to that computer? Are you going to sell it or?
Yeah, actually, it's sitting in the living room plugged in right now because I'm still, even though it's been a number of weeks, I'm still paranoid that there's something that didn't make it over. Right. But I will sell it. I will sell it. How about you? Well, you're not getting rid of a machine.
I don't think so. I mean, I may get rid of the cinema display because it's just kind of sitting there, and I don't see me using it right now. But yeah, I don't have any plans to sell anything because I feel like as soon as if I sell that cinema display, I'm gonna be like, I could have used that in the whatever room or something, Yeah. So I'm gonna hang on to it for a couple more months and then sell it.
Sitting right over here next to my iMac is an old 23-inch cinema display, not even the 30-inch, but the old 23, and I have all sorts of stuff on it. It's got all sorts of things on it that I don't look at full time, and I don't do my image editing there, but I like having that second monitor. It's quite nice.
Yeah. See, cool, man. So what's coming with Thunderbolt in the future? You kind of alluded to it earlier.
Thunderbolt. There's a Thunderbolt 3 which is already on the books. It's double the speed of Thunderbolt 2. It's the one that will allow us to go to 5K video external monitors. But there are no products that use it yet. So we're looking Somebody said end of the year. I think that's too optimistic since we're just about there. I think we're looking at first quarter of 2015 before the first products that use Thunderbolt 3 are available. And knowing Apple, they're never the first to adopt these things, so it's going to be a while. But that'll be a big bump right there.
Yeah, yeah. And then what about the DisplayPort?
DisplayPort, yeah, the new version of DisplayPort will be 1.3, and that will be using Thunderbolt 3 technology. That'll be the big thing. So
Love it, love it.
that's what we have.
Hey, I'm happy so far, man. I mean, you know, what was interesting is the lack of optical on this computer and the lack of FireWire on the computer.
Yeah, no FireWire. Yeah, and it's got 4 USB 3 ports on it. It's only got 1 USB 3 bus in it. The old machines had 2 USB buses in them, so you could, double up on devices. But this USB 3 is so much faster. They just have a single bus, but 4 connection points. No FireWire. Only 1 Ethernet port, which surprised me. The last machine I had 2 Ethernet ports, and it could do link aggregation to double the speed. Okay. It's gigabit Ethernet, which is great, but hey, 1 gigabit's not that fast anymore. So
no, it's not. Yeah, it's not. It's funny, and some magazines. It's funny. Some magazines are still shipping DVDs or CDs with the magazine with different assets on it. And I'm like, because I got one the other day. I'm like, this is awesome, but where could I play this?
Yeah, in fact, luckily I have a USB DVD CD drive for my that I got with my Mac Air. Because that's the only way to read them on this thing. One thing that's nice, though, I'll put my hand up here. If you look at the video, you can see that. This thing puts out quite a bit less heat than my old machine. Yeah. You don't have it to compare, but my old iMac put out a lot more heat than this one. They've done a really good job on that.
Yeah, yeah. I'm happy with it. It's bottom line for me is it's clean. Because the phones came out around the same time that this came out, and my iPad was kind of long in the tooth, and I needed to make some changes there because I wanted to go from a Wi-Fi iPad to one that had cellular into it. I ended up kind of refreshing my entire setup in the span of 3-4 weeks. So new iPad Mini, AT&T or cellular, the iPhone 6, and then this display or this new iMac is my sort of configuration of things that I work on every day, and I have some small complaints, but overall, I'm pretty happy.
Well, now this could be a whole show. I'll just throw this in as a tidbit, okay?
Uh-oh.
It's not a word I use very often. Tidbit. What a strange word. My iPad is now retired because I got the 6 Plus.
Yeah.
And it is so good. It is so big that I don't use an iPad. And I went out, I did the math on this. I went out and I bought an unlocked, no contract phone, which turns out over the course of 2.5 years to cost less money than getting one that you pay on a contract, a subsidized phone.
Yeah.
And the new phones will work on all bands, all carriers. So I go month to month. I can use Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, whatever I want on this thing. And,
and
it's so nice. It's so nice that I have one less device because I no longer use an iPad.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm jealous of that. But I'll tell you, I looked at the iPhone Plus and I thought about it long and hard, at least for a day. No, I thought about it long and hard, and playing with them in the store. Like, here's the 6. I use my phone a lot, for messaging and checking email throughout the day, and I use it as a remote for I use the phone a lot, and the big one was just too big, and I'm 6'2", so my hands are reasonably big size. Don't read into that, but it was reasonably big size, and still reaching to the top left of the screen was a stretch for my thumb. So I was like, okay. I just kind of came to the conclusion that I use my phone so much, I need the phone to be a phone. Some people need it to be more of a tablet than a phone, like you, but I needed the phone to be a phone and be portable and be able to slip in my pocket, and I can text while driving illegally and all that stuff. And then I needed my iPad, which is this guy, which is the iPad Mini 3 with the touch sensor thing, the touch ID. I needed this to be an iPad. I need you to be an iPad, so when I'm ready for the big screen or a bigger screen, I need to be able to see stuff with no compromises. I just felt like playing with the iPhone 6 Plus, I felt like it was kind of in between. It wasn't sure if it wanted to be a phone or if it wanted to be a tablet, and I wanted a more definitive line between the two. Like, I want my phone to be small enough to just be a phone, no qualms about it being a phone. And when I move over to the tablet, I want a tablet. I want it to act like a tablet and have the beef and heft and size and beautiful retina-ness of a tablet. So that was my methodology.
One of the things I like about this as a photographer is by using Lightroom Mobile, I have all of my portfolio stuff, all my important galleries on this device with me everywhere I go, because the iPad didn't go with me everywhere I went. It didn't fit in a pocket. This does, and this shows off all my work beautifully. So if someone says, show me Cuba, show me Turkey, show me Iceland, show me the Blue Angels, I've got it with me, and I love it.
But hey, I got a counter for that. So remember were you on the show when we were talking about Mylio, right?
Yeah.
So I've been playing with Mylio. The guys heard that show and sent me a test serial number to play with it. So I've been playing with it and banging on it. Now all my images from my entire Lightroom library are on all my devices.
Right.
So I kind of cracked that nut. So I can see all my shots from wherever on the phone, and it all sort of ripples. So I'm gonna interview those guys next week and kind of dive a little deeper into Mylio. But yeah, so I don't know. The point of all this, I think, is there is no one correct configuration for what devices you should have. I say I want my phone to be a phone, I want my tablet to be a tablet. That's right for me. That's not right for Doug. So you want less devices. You want a phablet, and an iMac 5K, and that's your ecosystem, and it works, right? So I don't know. It's just exciting to have all these tools, right?
It is. It's a candy store.
Yeah, it is.
All right.
Cool. All right. So what's coming up next? What's next on All About the Gear?
Great stuff. We've got the Nikon D750 show comes on after this one, 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
After that, we're doing this guy, the Fuji X30. Really nice little camera. I think it's only around $600 or so. Then the Canon 7D Mark II. Finally, they've upgraded the 7D. That's going to be a lot of fun. And and that pretty much gets us into January.
I'm interested to see what the changes on that 7D Mark II are.
Yeah, me too.
And I'm not even going to say anything else. I just want to see what the changes are. It's been a while, right? So there should be some cool stuff in there, right? So cool. All right, Doug. Well, I think that's it for this episode of All About the Gear, man. I'm excited. You're going to play with your iMac a little bit more today, or are you going to go out and shoot?
No, I got stuff to do on the iMac. It's keeping me prisoner.
Yeah, same here. I've got editing to do. Right after we hang up, I'm doing some editing. Cool. All right, Doug. Thanks a lot, man.
Thank you, Frederick. Bye-bye.
See you later.